need anything as such like complex bindings, etc. But in the Bootstrap, if you're using formatter classes, it's important to look around whether we have data SAPUI binding syntax as complex, or if not, the component within the index there will become something called as edge as a parameter. So this is something which is very important for us to look into it. So data SAP UI compact version equal to edge. If this is not added, so currently this is the latest parameter. Within the along this itself, this binding syntax equal to complex is inbuilt provided. So why we use this is, so if at all anywhere we are using the syntax for formatter especially, we use the syntax called complex binding. So
Mm.
just to recap, so if we see here, if you see this, we call it as simple binding, where straight away for the field supplier name, if you have to bind within curly braces, we'll provide. But instead, if we use multiple parameters like path, we specify as a path, and then we specify as formatter, then we are loading external file. So in this case for formatter, we have seen that externally we created one more JavaScript file, and we try to load this thing. So these kind of syntaxes we call it as complex binding. For that, one most important thing to understand is, if anytime if you face that uh, you know this shows that formatter is not able to recognize the parameter or field, then one possible reason could be it's because this particular library within the script of index, uh, this property might be missing. So that we need to check. So either this property, if it is there, it is well and good. If you're running on older versions, this is on 1.7 onwards, I think edge property has been within edge property itself, the complex binding is included. But if you're running older stacks or anything, make sure you manually add this particular entry called data SAP UI binding syntax equal to complex. Right. So this is where we were discussing lastly, and let me discuss few more things. Hope this is running. So you're able to practice anything? I mean, at least till what extent you're able to practice, so that further exercise also I can suggest.
Yeah, I try to use the different like containers,
Mhm.
and then try to read up a little bit about the aggregation.
Okay.
When you use that control, right, list control, it creates like many like
Correct.
views and everything. So was a bit confusing, for me. But I try to kind of like familiarize myself with that a little bit.
Mhm. So a list, a table, all these are like deep entities. If you want to visualize them, so if you
Mm.
map one field, they'll replicate everything. Okay,
Mm.
they are not like single fields. So whenever we have multiple rows, see, if you see these are like row items. So whenever we mapping it, we'll map only the first row in the OData service. So if in this case, service, if we are viewing as one item, so the aggregations whenever we specify within that items or rows, so these are the properties for which we'll in general will specify.
Mm.
Okay,
So what is the add-on you have on here for this? Is that JSON view or
yeah, let me just JSON format.
format? Okay.
So here, list in this case, if you see D results, when we are trying to map, we generally map only the first row. But these controls like list, etc., or a table. So these properties generally what they have is they have something called deep entities we use. So within the deep entity, generally how it has it now in this case there are like 24 rows. So always it will be repeating itself. So the controls the type of controls which we use itself will come to know. So because of that, there'll be we will come to know that multiple items will be there. So the properties also in this case, if you see the list, so here clearly we specify that multiple items. So items is the aggregation we have it. So by looking at the aggregation definition also we'll come to know whether it will have a single property or multiple property. Okay,
Mhm.
fine. So similarly here I think we have seen for format example for this case. So idea was whatever data we have in this case we had around values or different values etc. we try to use. So let me just show you one quick one as well. So in what all other cases we use is in this case I have tried to use it for comparison etc. For date conversions also we'll be using it in general. So if you have date conversions where in our case if you see here JSON, it is in JSON. So all JSON dates starts with an, in milliseconds. See the value here is nothing but milliseconds. So from 1971 from zero onwards it starts, and today's date, whatever date is there, it is in milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds will be equal to 1 second. So these all dates, if we currently in the OData, this is how it appears. So we have to use formatter and we have to convert this particular date to display accordingly. Okay. Let me show you how exactly we have it. So in second application which we have in that, I try to use those things as well. So whenever we have any data conversions or anything, so those cases we generally use this particular formatters, etc. Fine, we have it. So these all are reusable itself. So we can reuse them whenever we need. So So if you see here in this case, all these wherever we have it, every time we'll try to reuse it. So for always for the date, etc., this is a common two different date conversions we generally have, and we'll try to use most often. Just trying to. So here I'm just using two different approaches. We now in this case, if we are mapping any date field, so I'll just quickly map for one of the field with the date object. So supplier name, let's try to use created it in place of supplier name. So here we have the date. If you see the date by default, it comes
Mhm.
automatically when it loads it. It comes in this way, where it has with UTC format. So as per UTC format, GMT plus 5.5 hours of Indian Standard Time it appends, etc. But we do not want all this structure. So by default, the JSON, however it's stored in here, it is automatically represented in this way, right? If you see. So, but we do not want this kind of whole data to be displayed. We want to either we want to show the local based on the region automatic application. We wanted to pick the date, or we do not want to show the timestamp, etc. Only the date component. So for these kind of scenarios also we can use a formatter. So in this case, the syntax for such scenarios is we have to set as path. Then within the path we'll specify this parameter. Then followed by the path called formatter. So in this case we say formatter and then we'll give the path. So our full path will be UX, that's the namespace, followed by a project name. In our case, project name is login page, and then we say it is in util folder. So we say util, and then the variable we have created as formatter within it. So within this, we have created a variable called formatter. So we are specifying within util inside formatter, there are like a function called format date. Okay. So we'll specify in this way. So this should now try to give us a result. So I think we have to change this field as well. Format data. Yes, I think this is fine.
Because the file name is formatter.js and then the variable name is also formatter. So hopefully
No, 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 no. That could be fine. Any name could
that
be
is
fine.
fine, right? Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Because we have already used the formatter already in some other place as well,
Mm.
and should not be a problem at all. Name could be anything, so we can use any name. I'm just making sure. Okay. So let me check if we are able to load this thing. So we can place a breakpoint and we can try to identify. I think okay, already I have format date. So let's see if it loads still there. Yes. So okay, it's coming as undefined value and value. Yeah, we are getting a value here. So in this case, the input value we got is correct. Okay. See the logic here, what we are trying to do is we are trying to extract the JSON value. So I think the JSON value when we are extracting it, there could be an error. So if you see here, this logic, ideally it has to return as a value, but it is always exiting the loop and it is just returning what are the input we have. So the logic here or here is not returning any, it is returning as undefined. If you see the value here, so it says
Mm.
OData has nothing. So it's always exiting this loop. So we have to just try to check what's the issue in this logic. So we have a value here. This is created it. So input dot starts with just trying to check what. Okay. So in JavaScript standard method itself, we have this methods. So where in this case, if you key in the value in this case, our date value is in this function. So we have passed whatever value we have passed it in this case. Whatever value we passed it in the view. So here the field is created it. So created it field whatever value is it's being passed to this function. So the formatter function within this function, now we have this input value. So this function we are passing this value whatever value we are getting. So we are trying to say store the value in input indirectly. So what I am trying to do is we are trying to apply the standard data objects. In this case, if you key in this variable now, in this case, in the breakpoint, so input field we have value. If you specify dot, you could see lots of methods here. So it shows as get date. Only date component if you want, you can filter date component. but there's two methods are there. If you see date and UTC date. So if you want a universal time, so irrespective of user is running on local time or some, if you want to pick local time, you can always pick local time. Or if you pick get UTC date, then it will pick you the see if you are running the same application, it will show your own time. Whereas if I'm running it, it will show me the local time. So automatically it will pick the plus 5.5 hours of UTC time, whatever we have it. So in this case, only the date component we are extracting out of it. If you see, we have this date. So always this logic, there will be, if you pick UTC date now, it shows as 25. Whereas if I use get date, this shows as 26. So this is how we'll see universal time. If you pick it up, it is 25. Whereas if you pick local time, it is 26. Okay. So we can pick individual objects here. So date, time, etc. So if you check here, if you want the full year, so I can pick extract the full year. So we can extract using these methods individual date components, and we can concatenate and we can display the required output as such. Maybe this is the regular expression. I have used the regular expression in this case. Maybe this regular expression might not be, um, working as such. I can just tweak around the logic now. So in this case, I'll do is we'll just create a new function called to, and I'll specify as value. We can use this particular string concatenation as such. So this is my date component. This is my year component. Similarly, we need something called month. Month always it will be with this method we'll get one number short. So we have to increment by one. So it is 4, but you will get as 3. So it starts with 0 onwards. So it always will be one number less.
There's
Whenever we
no
write
zero month, right? So I don't know why they.
JavaScript, it starts with the assets. This has been in ESS 5 also. There has a logic behind them, I think. So they always will be a valueless asset. So we have to use +1 whenever we are writing the logic. So that is one important thing to remember, because that will mess up all the date logics. If you have by mistakenly, if you do not look into it, it will be messed up. So in this case, our simply what we can do is I'll create a variable called var uh, day, and then I'll store this o value dot to, what are we got this to input dot get date. So in this case, it is o value dot get date. So this will give us the day, and then we can use month. So like I said, we have to pick o value dot get month. So these are like standard methods using which we can play around and tweak around. So like I said, we have to increment it. So I'm just incrementing the value. So I think here also we get, yeah, auto suggestion, we are getting it. So now we can create a new variable called o date, and then we can just concatenate these values. So so in this case, if for the failsafe case, if there's some undefined value or something comes, what we're trying to do is we'll put a else condition to return whatever value we get. So to return the same value. So just in case if some garbage values, etc., incorrect value, date formats, etc., comes, whatever input value is there, return as this. If there is no value around it, just return whatever value it has. So even it will show as blank, etc. Dates cannot be null at all. So to handle it, we will try to use a simple scenario where we'll try to show it this way, right? So ideally now it should read the value.
You need to change the
Yeah, correct,
ending.
correct, correct. Format A2 we haven't changed it, so it will be very important to check the cases as well. Sometimes if we might miss out any case as well, also it will not be able to read.
Mm.
Yeah, accurate breakpoints.
Mm.
I think it shows some weird value. Let me check around 2051 where I think it's adding the numbers. Okay. Okay, let me put some. So it we did not say it's data object. So what we can do is we can specify that it's a value is data object. So for that purpose, we just do toString etc. Or there is a data object get data object as well. Um, so this is a detailed way also I have done it. So what it has, see this in JavaScript, both plus is used for
Adding.
adding as well as this one. So either we have to specify that as a data object, or either we have to use separator as well. So in this
I was
case,
about to say that, but then I was like, I don't know if that's not going to make a difference or it's going to automatically do that.
I think we can use a separator as well in this case. So what we are trying to do is we are just adding a separator called slash. So
Mm.
day slash, I think two times I have added it, not like. So this is like slash day slash month slash and year slash we are getting
Mm.
it. So this also will try to automatically correct it, or we can specify as this value as a date, and then we can show as well.
Because it's only showing like four characters or four. Now it came.
So that's what because it's assuming that as a adding of the numbers, so it is adding all
Mm.
the three numbers. So
Mm.
when it was adding, it is leading to
Mm.
2050. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to indicate that there is some separator we are trying to use, stating that these are independent objects. So here date separator, whatever separator we use, right? So in that way, we can use this separator as well. So we use different ways as well. So we specify different ways, dates, etc. In those cases, formatter will be of use for us, right? So
What is the other way, like where we declare the O data as a date object? Or
correct. So data objects also in this case, if you are using JSON model, it will come in this format. Okay, here
mm.
extracting this value, in order to extract, we are using this technique. But sometimes if you get directly SAP data object, if you are using OData, so straight away we get the data object. In that case, we have something called formatter classes. So
Mm.
these are formatters. There is something called formatter classes. So in case of formatter classes, let me show you. So this is how formatter classes is a other approach. If you see the screen, this is left one. Now right now we have done it where we used a formatter and then we try to do it. So other way is like using formatter classes. So standard we have a property called type called date. So in this case sap.ui.model.type.date we have. So this directly tries to set the properties around. So let me show you. So we can go to API ufi.sap.com, and within the API you can type for model. So where are we storing our data? Either in JSON model or OData model, right? So
Mm.
SAP UI.model dot JSON we are doing it. So within this model class we have something called types. So if you go inside SAP UI.model, so if you see SAP UI.model type, if you go to this subclass, so we are using UI.model.json model or OData model. So either both of the models support something called formatter classes. So format classes uses SAP UI.model.type class. So within this class you have different types. These are built-in types. So in case of date, etc., built-in type can be used. So if you by using this model.type.date, we can automatically specify what all value we want to extract. In this case, we can say the format name is ddmmyy, etc. straight away, and it will automatically return as the as date format. So instead of writing the logic straight away, you can specify this value as well. But it will not be always, standard date class itself will be able to use, etc. If you see here, you have to specify the syntax would be just this way: path ui.model.date, and format options will specify as value equal to ddmmyy. If you say ddmmyy, it will come as ddmmyy, or whichever format you want. You can use different notations here.
Mm.
So this is how multiple values we can try to represent as well. Okay. So we have multiple values in this case. For if you see, for integer value, if it's decimals or integer, some currency value we want to show, so we can straight away use integer, and we can specify how many values, minimum values we have to show. So minimum value, if you say as 3, it will show as 003 instead of 3, just 3, it will show as 3. And if it has to have maximum value also, you can restrict, etc. So these are like standard way of controlling the data types, etc. Clear? Or you want me to do a short access on this? If you want, we can just do data object for one more field. So
Yeah.
the syntax around will be the same. In the view now, instead of product ID, I'll try to use one more field. Let me add one more field. So in this case, we are using date instead of formatter. What we'll try to use is we'll use type p.ui.model.type, and we have to just make sure that in the type we specify as date instead of integer in this case, and then we have to specify the format options, whatever value we want, and constant, etc. we have to specify. So as per API, our object is date. Type, then we say format options. So within format options, now we have to specify whatever value we have it. So here format options we have to use. Out of this, any options we can use. So we have minimum maximum value, and it says it supports date values empty. Smallest value for this type. Okay, so smallest value in this case we can specify as current date, etc. And maximum date, largest value for this type. Okay, we can say as in this as date, we can say as a start value as today's date or minimum date, and max date is 31/12/999 is the maximum date. If invalid dates without users without selecting, we can ensure that way. I'm just checking for source default value. Okay. They haven't specified this value. It could be this value. Yeah, this one. So under format options, date format, we can specify as ddmmyy. I'll just use this format notation. Let's see. Yeah, I think this date format value itself, I think I doubt it. Documentation is here, it is value is missing. Source, okay. Let me use the same as here we are using minimum integers, right? So in the documentation, it just says source. Ideally, the object here it is missing. Date format, additional set option used to create a second date format object for current between string values in the data source and the model string to date. Okay, source is the one we can use directly. Let me try with source. So here the parameter is not clearly specified in case of documentation. If you see here in case of constraint, it was clearly specified as minimum is the parameter to which we have to set the value in the context in this case. So in this case, how format of minimum integers we have it, right? So left eye parameter is not documented here. So we cannot use some random unless we clearly what are the parameters defined in this particular method, the same name we have to use. If not, the system will not understand our own value. So that is missing here. Maybe I might have show measure is one. Okay, this is missing. Okay, there is one called pattern. Let me. mm, Pattern is not recognized. Let's check some sample here. Date. So date type we have it here. So here all examples will be listed. Let's check the notation here. For I think yeah they're using style as a keyword. Okay. Style is one keyword. There is see if you use SAP UI model.date they have used, and here they are trying to specify relative straight away, like different way they have specified it. Here if we see, so relative is trying to show us today, etc. If you are using it, and if you want to use if you use short, it will use 412 this format there it will show. If you want a month also to be shown, medium we can use. So here they have given different parameters. So this is not documented in the API. Okay, so in the samples we were able to get it. So we can use the style keyword or we can use this keyword. So directly we can use style and short we can specify, or we can use style as full for full date, or we can use format options directly as relative true also, and relative scale as auto also we can specify. Let's in this case this is what is required for us. We can use any of it. Okay. When pattern is also supported in the UI date, I think here the keyword which we are using is different. It's not documented clearly enough. It's
It's a
expected
typo, I
stuff.
think.
Yeah, I think there is some typo. Let me
One additional comma below that full, I think.
write it in a single line. So we have type, then looks good to me.
Mhm. There's two commas, no, apostrophes there. Is it coming from form style maybe, huh? Style has an open uh, quote up there and then
Okay, okay.
then one at the end, I guess.
Let me double check it. So let's double check it. So style doesn't require within this. So within the parameters not required. I think that is ideal. Yeah, right. So because of that, it is not able to detect it, I suppose. Unexpected, yes. Okay. Let me take this path. Maybe some typo or a format options O capital etc. Something is missing. Let me try to restructure. So that's the reason always what are fully qualified path, the syntax this is complex binding. So here we are using path type format option. Right? So this all should be however it is defined, we should try to use the same way. Else it tries to fail. This created it, right? Created it. Let me pick it from here. If not, we'll use changed it in this case. Here in this case, for us, path is changed it, right? So it is coming directly the date. So no, I think this is our late. So this is our full date. Sorry. So the last field where we have mapped it. So this is our using formatter we have used. This one using formatter classes. So this straightaway approach we are using, calling it as a formatter approach. So because sometimes the documentation may not be updated. In this case, document is not clearly updated. So it is not actually showing all the options. So sometimes we might have to, check around different ways. Other ways, like in the samples, they might have listed out, or we can use the UX guidelines as well. In the UX guidelines also, they'll be specifying all the options. So it may not be like always accurately capturing all the, because these are not very highly documented certain sections, very deep level. These are like minute things. So what we're trying to say is if we can use straight away this way as well. So different options. So these format options are like standard built-in framework provided conversions without writing logic. In this case, we try to write our own logic to manipulate the data. Either we can write our own logic or we can use framework provided, like how customized output we want to write, right? For the same data output, see if you say, if you use relative this way, it will show us today, etc. Today, tomorrow, etc. If you want to show. So based on the date, if it is matching to today's date, so it is showing us today. If related to today, whatever it is there, always it says 6 months from now, 6 months ago. Accordingly, it will translate the date and it will show. So we can play around using format, different types of formatals. So in the samples, they'll give us different styles, etc. So here there might be some other examples. So this is first example where they have given. So we can similarly check out these all full length, short, etc. If you are trying to give this, how it will appear. So we can check which is suitable for us, and accordingly we can format the data. So in this case, all we have to change is style, property, etc. Clear? So this is how the main reason we use different formatters to manipulate the data around. And likewise, we have understood like using standard also. So always we it may not be, we may not have the standard property I'm trying to say. So we might have to write logic using. So if you want to write our own logic to format data, etc., then formatter is the standard way of doing it, and formatter classes are the built-in functions which SAP provides. So that is a difference here. There is one more way using expression binding. So if you see here, this is how the syntax looks. Now we have just discussed about simple binding. So here, if you have parts, if you split into multiple, instead of path, we have, if you are giving as parts. So if you see here for date of birth, etc., we might have to give multiple paths. So in our syntax, we have just given single path, correct? So date object we have again. If we have to give multiple paths around, etc., so then we can use a keyword called parts, and we can specify 3 different date variables, and we can you can take the example of address also. So address case also city, um, state, etc. We want to club, etc. So in that case also we can, in the same field we want to show complete address, then we'll use parts, etc. So this they call it as composite binding, but you need not remember these names what we call it as, but technically when to use which syntax you need to remember. So in this case, if we have multiple values to be shown on a simple place, so here in this case in the one row, we have a single field. In single field we want to show the complete address, then you have to understand that you have to use formatter parts as a syntax in order to accommodate multiple bindings. So that they call it as composite binding. So composite binding when we'll use when we need to map multiple fields. Same. In so one simple path we can specify multiple values here. and we can use the formatter classes to concatenate all the three. Just how date how we have concatenated, ddmmyy we can concatenate, we can show it. So this is another syntax which we use. So one more syntax is called expression binding. So in this case, expression binding is how we use is, this is a standard notation. So uh, either true or false case. So if you have
Is it
boolean
a
value,
JavaScript way of
correct,
uh,
correct. So this is regular expressions, etc. All these are uses something called expressions. So JavaScript we have something called expressions. If you here, if you see first value, it is divided into three parts. So one is your input value. So the first parameter is input value, followed by operator. So this greater than is an operator. This is if it is true, the condition. If this condition matches, if it is true, after question mark, this result will be shown. If it fails, this result will be shown. This is only can be used only in case of boolean, etc. Like true false value, yes no values, or on off, available unavailable, so out of stock, available. So you might notice that only two cases you will get an answer, either true or false. Instead of writing a formatter logic, we can say in case price is greater than 100, if the stock unit available stock is if less than 5, you show it error that it is very critical, the stock is very limited stock, you want to show it in some red color. In this case, what we can show is we can specify the value as if we'll pass the value of quantity here, quantity greater than 5, then show as available success, if not we can show it as false. Okay, so let me use it in one example so we'll understand it. So here I can say, I think we have a unit measure here. So what I'll do is, here if you see previous exercise we try to use this one. Let me use, here we have width property, etc. Let me pick, yeah, price we can take the example of price, or any field which you think that we can compare and we can populate it. So price here I'll try to map it to this field, one other field. So here what we can use is, we can use the same expression binding how we are using it here. Should be careful of the expression how we are building it. So if we do not specify this syntax correct, it will not be able to read it around. So we are binding the value for the first, we are binding using dollar, which are the value we have it, value we pass it first, then we'll use a comparison operator. So in this case I'll say if greater than 2 as a condition, and then I'll say uh, this value whatever is it, this if you want to dynamically we have to specify, we can specify the value. So in this case dynamically quantity, there's no quantity field here I think. Measure unit, measure width, height, dimension unit. Okay, for here illustration I'm just there's no quantity now. So ideally if quantity, see let's understand the scenario. So we have a price for one item as 50, and quantity is 2. There is another item, price of that item is 100, and the quantity is 10 suppose. So what we're trying to say is, now this is limited in stock and we have this one as plenty in stock. So what we want to show ideally is on the screen, we want to show some color indicator that it is in red, stating that it is in limited in quantity. Okay. And for this case, it is sufficient. So we want to show green, stating that available. Okay. So this is an available. This is limited stock, etc. So how we can use formatter as well, where we can specify the logic condition stating that if quantity is greater than certain threshold. So for that threshold, we can use dynamic value or we can hard code the value. So in this case, there is no relevant field. We can either hard code it. So one way to do is using formatter classes, where we can specify the condition as if quantity is greater than 5, then I can say the value as return I can say red, uh, and else I can say it as written green, correct? So this is how we'll traditionally use. But other way to use is expression binding. So how do we use expression binding? So in this case, we're trying to say price and quantity. So quantity, I'm trying to hard code the value. Sorry. So here I'll go here. I'm specifying quantity is greater than 2. Then I'm saying as I'll say textiles limited stock, and else it will say available. Right. So this is how the syntax. So here two products comparison we are doing it, and question mark. Then what should be the answer? Either it should be either first, if matches, first answer. If doesn't match, second answer. So that's how the expression binding will resolve into. So in this case, I have specified it this way. So if price value is greater than 2, then question mark greater than 2,
Limited
limited
stock.
stock will show.
Limited stock need a quote as well, I think.
So limited stock it will show, else it will show as available. So this is our condition. So let's see if it works or not. So I think where did we add? Okay, here we added. So here it shows limited stock. I think everything is a limited stock. The value, I think everything is greater than 2. Here if you see some cases we got available, right? So here it is trying to evaluate. So expression binding allows us to do it relatively easily. So it's case to cases basis we can use different approaches. But see, if you are if you do not want to remember all, always you can handle one approach, that is formatter. So you have multiple ways to follow. But in general tendency, what I do is for anything I'll not use framework. I'll try to write my own logic, because ultimately this is relevant for only one or couple of scenarios only we can use this approach. But formatter, if you use, you can play around with the logic all by yourself. Okay. Maybe there could be some flexibility. There will be some particular use cases where this will be very useful. Even this execution also, it will be very easy for in this case. It we need not a loop around. Performance wise, this is more performance intensive, because if you hang too many records, format refuse, it will loop around those many times, correct? Whereas expression binding is it doesn't actually has to execute, it is in milliseconds, but still performance wise it has to execute only single line of code, whereas here it has to loop around a logic. So if you have too many values, we have to loop around, where there it results fast. It is very minute metric we are talking, but still if you want to improve, expression binding can help you out. So these are limitedly used, but still you can use this approach as well, is what I'm trying to say.
If only you have to only give like two, like a Boolean thing, like you mentioned,
Correct,
right?
correct. Only those cases this will be useful. There is one more way where this is used. I'll show you that as well. I just remember. If you see some places, we'll say if it is mobile device, hide certain field if you want to do. Okay, then we can use expression binding. That is one suitable example. If you see here, let me check. Okay, there will be device properties. Let me device. We have check. Okay, let me check if I have this format manifest values. We have it. Where is manifest? Okay, here we have something called device properties. So if you see here, in phone, if you wanted this desktop device types, so this device types we can extract. So if device, we have certain properties using which we'll come to know which device we are using it. Okay, so whether it is phone or not, we can try to say, and if it is expression binding, we can design it this way. Like, so we can say read the property this, and we can specify if it is phone. Uh, we can select this way. In this case, if we can use not, if not phone condition, we can specify in case of not equal to, um, I think we can use this way. Sound good? Create. I'm just thinking on the logic how I would have to identify whether it is a phone or a tablet, etc. Phone or a desktop in this case, if I have it. I think I can, um, instead of this, select, okay, create device. Okay, here probably I can take a variable. So here, if selected device is accordingly, if whatever device we are selecting it, if value is desktop, etc. So if whatever value we get, so here this condition is relevant. I mean, not very much relevant, but what we are trying to do is, so if selected device, we'll try to check the value around. So how we can check is using device properties we can identify. Okay, so we can extract what's the device type. So from here we'll get the value. We can try to using device properties we can try to identify whether it is phone or desktop, etc. So we have to extract this value. So how do we extract this? We have something called get uh, honor component, get honor component or device type. So if we use that method, we will be able to read all the parameters in the manifest file. In the manifest file, what all values you have, everything we can read. Even the OData service also we are currently reading the same way. What we have to use, this dot get honor component. Honor component dot when we say manifest file, every property we can extract. So using those property also, we can identify device types. So in this case, device type is desktop or tablet. If it is enabled, this comes as true or false. So based on selected value, automatically we'll be able to understand true or false. In this case, accordingly, if device is desktop, etc., we can say to hide certain fields around. Okay, we can hide certain columns around or etc. So we can say as hidden, we can pass this parameter, or we can say it as visible. So we can control certain visibility properties using this expression binding as well. They're like maybe different use cases will come around, but all every time whenever we have to identify, then using expression binding, we can try to utilize this particular scenarios. Okay, if you actually look at the exact use case, then you can actually visualize this, but this is one place where it might be of some use, expression
Mm.
binding. Okay, where we know the device and in certain devices we want to hide certain fields, then we can
Mm.
use this field. We have one more approach, like I said, there is one standard CSS method as show icons as visible. So even that approach also we can use. There is no single approach. I have last time I explained, I think, um, show only on desktop, etc. I think I forgot the CSS class, so I generally don't remember. uh, UEFI desktop visible CSS class. As long as we remember the how to use it, so we can take help of documentation. We need not remember anything. So if you
Mm.
use SAP UI visible only on desktop CSS property, then it will be automatically hidden. Okay.
Mm.
So only on tablet, we can use expression binding also, I mean to say, in this case. So
Mm.
we can set the CSS property also. If in this case, based on device, if you know, we can specify these two values as well. So in this case, if you instead of this way, we can set this visible only on tablet CSS directly to the CSS property. We can pass this value as well. Correct. So if it is phone, if it is tablet, etc. condition, so CSS class will be changed to the tablet. If it is etc., then it is phone, it will change to CSS class. We can dynamically change to phone. So how do we add dynamically CSS? So you can use expression binding as well. If you see here class, we are using single value, right? This is not dynamic. So how do we make it dynamic? You can use expression binding. If you want to use two different CSS classes based on the device, then you can use expression binding as well. This way, correct? You're able to relate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is like different syntaxes which are supported. we can use it any of these approaches. So logic can need not be always written in one approach. Anybody can free to use any different type of syntaxes. So this is one approach which SAP provides, and you can, if your scenario meets this scenario, you can try to use. There is one more binding syntax called metadata binding. What is metadata binding is, so we have this entity set, right? Let me, so we will type out our dollar metadata for OData service, then it will give us exact whatever we have it in the OData service restrictions. Like each table, we might have defined date elements, etc. So if you see in this case, business partner entity set has key field as business partner ID and name property as address. So if you see here, there are like certain limits. So in this case, for the name property, max length is 10, and in this case max length is 80, and the data type is string. For certain cases the data type is date time, so this is the data object, and precision is 7 values, right? So these limitations automatically validation, for UI validation we can use one syntax called metadata binding. So in this case directly you can set we have minimum value, max value, etc. for input. If we have, straight away we can pass this syntax. The syntax is the entity should be followed by hash. Okay, in this case, our syntax should have business partner hash business partner slash, in this case if you are using date, create a date should be your field, and slash at the rate whatever field we are using. So we are using precision, suppose 7, we can, you have to use. If you are using max length, you have to say max length. Then automatically UI will not allow you to enter more than 30 characters. So straight away we can, using this metadata binding, we can do UI validation as well without actually writing the logic. You need not write the logic that if entered value is greater than 7, throw error that cannot enter 30 characters, etc. So straight away we can use this particular value as well. So this is one more syntax which we can use. Maybe some field, input field we do not have, right? I think we have input field here. So here password we are trying to enter, right? So here there is no max limit set here. It is allowing to enter any number of characters. So here I'll try to add this metadata binding. So this is one way. So let me, here we, I think ours is product set, I suppose. Max length, supplier ID, etc. Let me take it inside this, because product set is bound to this. Again, we have to set the binding there as well, or if we want, we can use this as well. So here, second field I'm trying to take as input field. Let me add one product name. I think I have to make sure that IDs are always unique. If it is one, it is used, we should not use anything else. Let's me not have type here. Let's see whether it is displaying or not first. Then probably we can enter. So here now we got an. If you see, there is no error validation here now. So I'm entering how many are values I'm entering. There's no error validation. Ideally, if you use any of this field there, and if you set the property, it should show the value. So we'll try to bind this value here. We'll use this expression binding. So hash entity set, then field, then at the rate. Okay. I think max length L is capital. Hash. So understanding this, if we understand the syntax rightly, then accordingly we can use. But most of the cases we fail to, what do we say? Uh, if we know how to use it, then I think according to situation we can use it. Just understand that this is also one syntax we can use. That's it. So we need not to remember all this syntax, etc. We can. Excellent. So this is our syntax. So let's check the syntax here. So hash our entity set, then followed by our field, then at the rate what are the field we want to try. So in this case, we are trying to use max length. So this should match our product set, etc. So ideally, this should automatically allow us to enter only 10 values. So let's see if it does any validation. So by default, we map the product ID. Now, if I enter any more values, so it's not showing any error stage. Let me can his no submit. Is there any error? Oh, these are not relevant errors. Okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah, one more parameter is also there. For this to start, there is one restriction in manifest. There is one property called handle validation true. So we have to set that for automatic framework, whether it has to automatically handle all the validations or not. So though we are using it, just like how I mentioned, like for the complex binding, how we have to set a parameter. There is one parameter called handle validation. So I have to specify that under UEFI property, framework property. So this is my UEFI property class. So within this, I have to specify here. So here anywhere I can specify the value. So I'll say handle validation. Handle. Okay. This I have to set to true. So when I set this to true, then automatically framework will handle the validations. So what are expressions we have used? So system doesn't know that we are using an expression binding. So how I explained that complex binding we are using in the runtime, in the manifest we can have to specify that we have to inform it that please handle the validations because we have used certain expression bindings within our logic. So we have to explicitly inform. This will be they'll automate in further releases, but right now it is manual. So I think now it should work. Me no, something else am I missing? I don't remember. No, it should not allow for they'll tell. Okay, there is no error as well. There is no syntax error as well. It is pretty much it is taking this value max length input value. Let me no. It's moving. There is something strange. Maybe something else am I missing? I'm not sure. Ideally, it works for this. So the approach is the syntax is right. If there is a syntax error, it would have thrown us a syntax error. So, but strange that it is not. Um, reading this particular limits which we have set. Okay. So ideally, this will read the limits because I have tested it in one more scenario for v4. But like I said, handle validation is a property which I have set. Let me
Is
if
it
not
could it be because of the width? Does any width has any
no
role? Okay.
width had not control anything.
Hmm.
One second, I think in my charger. Yes. Okay, syntax wise this is correct. I'll check around if what's maybe I might be missing something else. So technically we have to specify like how complex binding we have specified under UEFI. So UEFI is all about framework properties. So if you see here, we have different three sections. So one is app section, one is UI section, another is UFI section. So there are like three manifest whenever you break up application ID, etc. Those all will be under app, and UI will tell us which version to use. UFI version 1.85, 1.87, etc. Or what all libraries we have to use. UFI is about framework. If you have to give any instruction to framework, like full width has to be we should not have any letterhead mode. If you see on the left side, there is some space, right? We have a property called full width equal to true. If you set that, always it will come in 100%, like full screen. It will utilize the full screen as such. So there are like certain manifest properties which you have to explicitly inform to the framework to handle automatically. So here in this case, validation, we have to inform it that framework you handle the validation. I'm not doing any validation from my side. Okay, so for that we have some property called handle validation. Okay, even after giving this, it was not working. And if you see compact, always it has to be compact or etc. So these are like framework instructions. So this is a syntax we use. So I think tomorrow I'll try to identify what's missing. Then technically, if we enter it, ideally it should limit us with the max length. So this type of syntax we call it as metadata binding. Very rarely we'll use, but this is also can be used. Okay, instead of doing lots of legwork, if you specify this property, it is very easy. See, all data limits are already explicitly defined in the backend. This character supports max and this supports only a string, etc. So we can use string also. If you want to have a field where here only number we want to support, they cannot enter alphabets. So then we have to specify it as we can specify the type as what are the type we have, type we can specify. So if you specify this particular type, they cannot add numbers, only strings they can enter. It will be taken as a string, right? So how do we define? We have to define instead of max and we'll specify as string @string. If you say @string, then automatically whatever field we have, sorry, @type we have to specify. Whenever you specify @type instead of max length, it will automatically support only string values. It will allow us to enter. It will not allow us to enter any more values. So instead of max length, I have to specify this to value property. So product set, here I have to specify as type. So when I say @type, it will not allow to enter any other value. Only string type values it will support. So this is how the syntax allows us to put conditions of metadata. Whatever metadata conditions are there, if you want to use it in your application, the syntax to be used is metadata binding. Okay, entity set will be followed by hash, and your property will be followed by @. That is the one we have to remember. Hash entity set, @ is your property name. This is a field as such. So which are the field we have? These are the 4 different expression bindings. I mean, different kinds of bindings we generally use. Clear?
Yeah.
I think we have discussed about format classes and bindings. And fragments we have already seen in our previous exercise. And these are some of the common ways we use. There is one more called factory function. Tomorrow I'll just explain factory function, and it's similar to formatter. This is like when we have to use different data types for the dynamic list of the same field. So the same input field now, if we have to use number as well as suppose if the price value is there, so we have to display price as $125, 125 USD. If price doesn't exist, we have to allow them to enter the value. So when they're entering, it becomes as number data type. If it is displaying, it is a string, correct? So with USD, when we are prefixing it, it becomes a string. It is not a number any longer. So whenever if there is no price allowed, then we have to change this field to some integer field, else it has to become a string field. So in those cases, dynamically we can change the single field property. For that we use generally factory functions. So at the same time, if you want to handle multiple values for the same field, then we will go for factory function. So I'll explain tomorrow in detail when to use factory functions and how to use, etc. But so far we try to understand basic way to alter the data and basic syntaxes available in UFI framework. Okay, fine. We'll meet in tomorrow's class. Any questions over?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, I'll try to fix this issue. I'm not sure about what's missing here. Then probably that also will cover, and then we'll continue with this session. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.
Yeah. Thank you.